Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jan Szerwiński. Azerbaijan has recently joined the long list of countries struck by Iranian drones and missiles. And while Iranian president's apology to its neighbors appears to settle things for now, the future remains far more uncertain. Why did Iran strike Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan exclave? Will President Massoud Pezeshkian's vow not to strike Iran's neighbors translate into a genuine policy? And how could Azerbaijan retaliate in the event of another strike? Joining us now to learn about how these issues are viewed by Azerbaijan's neighbor Armenia is Richard Giragosian, founding director of the Regional Studies Center. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you.
So first of all, let's take a look at Armenian perspective. Armenia itself was not attacked by Iran, but does it mean it could simply watch idly by as the events continue to unfold? Was it totally unaffected by the crisis?
Well, no. For Armenia, there is genuine concern. What we see is two deeper trends at play that directly affect Armenia. First is the consistent escalation over the war against Iran. Second is the expansion of the physical battle space. And this is where the attacks on neighboring Azerbaijan are most significant. For Armenia, there's also concern that at some point the conflict will spill over, perhaps with a potential influx of Iranians seeking to escape the war.
And just a brief mention of the question of the airlines, because there was a massive chaos that was caused initially with airlines suspending flights to the Middle East. Was Armenia actually able to deal with the increased volume of passengers, some of whom were actually rerouted into the region?
Well, that's a good point, because what we see is a significant increase in the number of civilian flights transiting Armenia and Azerbaijan from Asia to Europe. This air corridor is very significant, but also demonstrates the enhanced strategic significance of Armenia and this region. However, what we also see is new concern over what this means for the delicate and fragile peace between Armenia and its neighbors. And there is great concern over the possible escalation of tension or conflict between neighboring Azerbaijan and Iran itself. Despite the increase in air traffic, the outlook for stability is not as assured.
And so these attacks directed against Azerbaijan were not just random. They hit the Nakhchivan exclave. Why is this important?
Well, it's very important in terms of this expansion of the battle space, but it's also not just the drone attacks that struck a civilian airport in the Azerbaijani exclave. The following day, there was an arrest of a Iranian Revolutionary Guard sleeper cell in Baku, reportedly planning attacks against the Israeli embassy and the synagogue in the Azerbaijani capital Baku, and perhaps targeting the Baku-Ceyhan oil pipeline. Just as we've seen Iranian military attacks targeting the energy infrastructure in the Gulf, to the north, there's also the danger of attacks directed at the oil and gas energy infrastructure running through the South Caucasus as well.
So now that you mentioned the pipeline infrastructure, let's move to that issue for a bit before coming back to Nakhchivan, because this, I believe, also has certain, or may have certain repercussions to the relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But with the oil infrastructure, why would Iran want to target this in particular? What would be at stake? Because this is where other parts of the globe, not just the region itself, actually come into play.
Well, what we see is an Iranian backlash, a strategic response to the attacks on Iran, targeting the oil and energy production in the Persian Gulf. Therefore, what the Iranian strategy is about is a war of attrition in terms of using drones and missiles to overcome its delicate position. But moreover, we see a degree of Iranian interest in exerting more of a price or even pain on energy production in the region. This is also why they've attacked Turkey. There was a downed missile from Iran against NATO member Turkey as well. We should expect, unfortunately, a continued escalation. And in this context, it's more about the global impact on energy markets as well as a significant destabilizing effect.
And now, which countries would be affected if there was a disruption to the transit of oil through the pipeline in Azerbaijan?
Well, that's a good question, because we see two very different sets of countries that would be impacted. In terms of transit, it would obviously be Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, where the actual physical pipeline runs, but it would also affect energy consumers in the European Union, as well as energy states in the Central Asian region. And most importantly, as we've seen in the Persian Gulf, it's the Chinese who also are significant consumers of this energy. So any disruption will have global ramifications as well as local implications.
Now, coming back to Nakhchivan province, which was targeted by the Iranian strike, do you think that has anything to do with the TRIP initiative, so the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, which presents a long-awaited opportunity for peaceful trade relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, something that was not possible before America actually stepped in? Do you think that Iran wants to undermine this deal and its functioning?
I actually do not. In other words, this TRIP, or Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, is an important agreement on connectivity, where Armenia is allowing its territory to be used for road and rail connections from Azerbaijan to this exclave of Nakhchivan. The Iranian attack, however, is much more about lashing out at her neighbors. But there's a second underlying factor that's most important. Azerbaijan is closely allied not just with Turkey, but also with Israel. And as the only other Shia state in the world, there is an inherent rivalry between Iran and Azerbaijan that's exacerbated by everything from territorial disputes to the temptation by Azerbaijan to join the war against Iran, to destabilize the Iranian regime, given the large number of ethnic Azeris living in northern Iran. So in this context, it's about Israel as well, and it's about geopolitics, and much less about this TRIP accord.
So now, this is a crucial issue, right? So far, President Ilham Aliyev said we're not going to join the war. But you've already mentioned the massive Azeri minority in Iran, which is like between 20 and 25 million people. Could those people actually participate in some sort of initiative? Should there be more attacks against Azerbaijan or some sort of escalation of hostilities? Do you think it is a possibility that the authorities in Azerbaijan would say, okay, so our citizens now should join us in an initiative to essentially break free from this deadlock? Could this mean a destabilization inside Iran itself? Could these people potentially, to put it bluntly, rise up against the current regime in Iran, with Azerbaijani backing, of course?
I see the danger somewhat differently and elsewhere. In other words, the issue of the ethnic Azeris in northern Iran is much less of a real issue. The president of Iran himself is an ethnic Azeri. There is a great degree of assimilation within Iran. And the ethnic Azeri population in northern Iran, despite the name, is not the same as post-Soviet Azerbaijan. The danger, however, is the Americans and the Israelis, first by arming the Kurds, and second, perhaps being tempted to use Azerbaijan and to attempt to use this issue to undermine Iran. The second danger is the Azerbaijanis, given their close relationship with Israel, may also be willing to play more of a role as a new weapon against the Iranian regime.
Now, when the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian recently said that Iran will no longer attack its neighbors unless there are direct attacks from their territory against Iran itself, do you believe him? Or do you think that perhaps he might want to weaponize the issue later on and simply attack other countries or threaten to attack them just because he perceives them, or Iran, the Iranian regime perceives them as being somehow affiliated with the United States or Israel, and using this as an excuse for a continued belligerence?
I think both. But what's most significant about the Iranian president's statement was actually the aftermath. There is now a profound and distinct diversion of interest between the civilian leadership of Iran and the military security hardliners. The president has backtracked and has clarified or even climbed down from his message. And I do think that the harder line, Revolutionary Guards and the Islamic clerics, will actually have the upper hand over the civilian president. So I do think Iran is expected, unfortunately, to continue targeting its neighbors, and such hopeful, optimistic statements as issued by the president are going to be less and less.
Could it be the reason why Masoud Pezeshkian so far has not apparently been targeted by any strikes? It doesn't seem like he has been a priority target so far. Do you think that this is whom Trump might have had in mind, saying we have some candidates for succession? Do you think he might be aiming for a Venezuela-type scenario whereby some members of the former regime are allowed to remain, provided that they change their course in terms of allegiances, in terms of foreign policy, and so on?
I'm not sure anyone knows, because unfortunately the reckless absence of planning and strategy by the Americans launching this war doesn't really reassure those in the region. For example, from an Armenian perspective, we're greatly worried that the lack of an exit strategy, as well as the mixed messages from an incoherent set of objectives from the Americans, only makes this even more dangerous. And I think, as we've seen from the global impact on energy prices, etc., the U.S. has blindly stumbled into this with no clear way out. And that's most disastrous, especially for Armenia, which is the only stable country on Iranian borders.
Richard Giragosian was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news, updates and commentary.